Welcome to Super Meat World. Into this update, we're gonna play another Team Meat chapter entitled The Sewers of Goo. But Alice, it turned out that we couldn't find it into the recommended chapters list, so unfortunately, we're not gonna play this chapter. Sorry, go look somewhere else. Nah, I'm just kidding. This chapter is pretty interesting, if only because it exists in two different forms. On the Xbox 360, this chapter is called Sewers of Dross, as a reference to the game Gish, which also was made by Inman Macmillan, or at least he did the art for it. And well, instead of playing as the Goo Ball, you will play as Gish. And this will be a huge difference because, contrary to the Goo Ball or Head Crab, Gish happens to be a lot faster than both of these characters. If anything, he's about twice as fast. The interesting thing is that there are two characters that do exactly the same thing on the PC version, but I don't know, maybe this is how it went. We have two characters that are identical, so their speed must add up to the speed of that other character, so hence why they're both slow as molasses, but if we combine their speed, they will be fast as this other guy. Okay, or maybe it didn't really go that way, but come on, I'm trying to find a way to justify all of this, so don't blame me. This level shows pretty well the huge difference between the two characters, because when you play as Gish, these jumps are nowhere near as finicky or as tight as they are. Due to his increased speed, Gish really manages to do these jumps a whole lot more easy, but yeah. Essentially, the slow speed of Goo Ball pretty much makes this a pretty slow-paced chapter in overall. And while you'd think it will be a detriment, because most of the appeal of this game for me is the huge speed and the high pacing that this game has, but I don't know, I really like this chapter. I really like the gimmick behind Goo Ball, Gish, or Head Crab, or whatever name of the character that you want to talk about. But yeah, these levels do a good job of making you use all of the abilities that come with those characters, which means sticking onto the wall, hanging on the ceiling, and just walk up there in order to easily reach your goal, just like this. But yeah, this is a pretty cool chapter, mainly because the level design for the most part is really good into this one chapter, and most of them do a really good job of making you use the Goo Ball mechanics. However, this one really wouldn't be the case, but so far, all of the other levels required you to hang onto the walls and the ceiling and whatever, so yeah, and overall, it's a pretty educative chapter. So, on the PC version, this chapter is called Sewers of Goo instead of Sewers of Dross, which is kinda weird because, for the most part, most of the alternate characters that you will have onto the Xbox 360 version of the game will be characters that you will see in games that were, for the most part, found on Xbox Live Arcade, but Gish, as far as I know, was only released on the PC and Mac, and I think it also appeared on Linux too, but yeah, other than that, there's no consoles on which it appeared. But yeah, as of Sewers of Goo, because yeah, it's about time that I talk about the chapter and why it's called Sewers of Goo and all of this, but yeah. World of Goo was a pretty well-received and acclaimed game which was released by an independent developer entitled 2D Boy. And well, the game itself was a pretty good mixture between tower building, puzzle, and well then lemmings, in which you had to build towers using pretty much all kinds of different Goo Balls in order to reach the goal. And it was a pretty slow-paced but really fun game in which you were free to try out a whole lot of things, so yeah, we can see every kind of characters into this game, not only platforming characters. This level is incredibly tricky when you don't know how to do it. In fact, when I first recorded this chapter, I had to stop my recording onto this one level because the number of deaths simply piled up at such an absurd point that it will be, no, fuck this. I have to find out how to do this level properly, otherwise we're not gonna go anywhere. This level is pretty hard, mainly due to the reason that the solid shooters shoot pretty frequently. Also, your character is really slow and his jump is pretty limited, so you have to make good use of your hanging onto the walls in order to stay there. And also, you must find the proper timing in order to jump from one platform to the other, so that you won't be hit by the saw blades. The best timing is to stand onto the one top platform there and go for it whenever the lower saw blade shooter shoots. I figured this is a level that was a whole lot easier when you will play as Gish, if only because his faster speed probably makes it a whole lot easier, but I can't really test it beforehand, if only because I don't own the Xbox 360 version of this game, and in fact I don't even have an Xbox 360 to begin with, so hey, there's absolutely no way for me to even test out all of those things. And hey, since we're playing a chapter which is all about a character from the game World of Goo, I figured that we will stick the World of Goo soundtrack into this one update. That was another great thing about this game, the soundtrack, because it happened to be a whole lot epic. It had all kind of different styles. It did classical music really well, has well and more creepy ambience. It has a whole lot of Vangelis and Ennio Morricone influences into the music, which really makes it neat. It's almost as if you were watching a movie while you were playing a game in which you will simply take Goo balls and make a tower out of them. But yeah, this level and the other that came right before it are levels that I really don't care much for, if only because they don't really make use of the abilities that Goo Ball have, which is to stick onto the walls. There are a few levels into this chapter which really don't make good use of the character, but in overall, it does a really good job with exploiting the character's strength and weaknesses. But I don't know, this is the one level into the chapter that I don't really get. It really doesn't involve much of the character's abilities at all. It's all about making those really tiny jumps. Oh, and of course, most of the sound that you hear from the character come from the actual game itself. Most especially the little noises and screams that the Goo Ball does whenever he spawns into the level. I didn't mind this level prior to recording it, but after playing through it in the recording, I really hate it now, if only because of a glitch that I encountered. As I tried to take a running start in order to jump over the saw blades, I stopped dead in my tracks the moment that I tried to jump. And whenever I'm anticipating the fact that I will stop dead in my track, then the character finally decides to do the jump correctly, and I'm such in a huge state of shock that I pretty much plummet into a pit instead of making my jump correctly, because I'm expecting my jump to be much shorter than it actually is. So yeah, in overall, playing this level was not a pleasant time. And just in the case that you don't believe me, we have Mr. Replay in order to showcase the evidence of my struggle through this one level. I mean, just look at the amount of time that I've died, and almost all of these times were due to the final jump at the end, or pointless stunts like that, if only because my attention span is fading away. Yep, all of the Goo Balls disappeared right at the end. This level, however, introduces one of the mechanics in Sewers of Goo or Sewers of Dross or whatever name of the character and chapter that you want. But well, it has one of the gimmicks that I really don't care for much at all. Levels that have fans which drag keys toward you and which are really slow. It was not too bad into this one level, but later on we'll encounter a similar level in which this gimmick is driven to the point of absurdity in order to create the most uncompelling level of the entire chapter. And lasers make their first appearance in a really long while, because really, when was the last level which had lasers in it? I really don't remember, because with the exception of the hospital, you don't see lasers anywhere else in Super Meat Boy. Also, are you willing to bet that lasers will be a huge pain in the ass later on into the chapter? Well, maybe not into those levels. In fact, this is almost a copy of that other level that we saw earlier, where there were saw shooters shooting up and down in alternates. Only though this time you have to alternate between the floor and the ceiling, because otherwise you're not gonna have anything to grab onto. Also, starting from this level, the background gets really hairy into this one thing, because you can see the decrepit city into the background as well, and the dark blue color. It seems as if you're into some kind of underworld realm or something, but here we go! This is the one level I was talking about, where the gimmick of having keys being pushed slowly toward you by a fan will be a complete absurdity, because yeah, it looks about as fun to play than it looks. I mean, it's not a hard level, but it just becomes really hard because, yeah, at one point you become so bored of the level that your attention span drifts and you don't care anymore about what you're doing. So here we go, I'm just speeding through this again because I don't want you to see this level again. So yeah, was it a fun level, ladies and gentlemen? It was enjoyable indeed. Also, this level pulls off a particularly dick move to the player, because if you take too long to jump for the key here, well, it just drifts away like that, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do with the exception of waiting about 30 seconds for the key to come back again. So, it's definitely not the most inspiring chapter of the level. Okay, and I've been killed if only because there was like 1 pixel of my body which was drifting off the edge of this one platform. That is pretty unfortunate, but Yeah, this level, however, I'm not really sure what it does into this one chapter, because it really doesn't have much to do with the character here, and it's honestly not that hard. I mean, this late into the chapter, you would think that the level will start becoming a whole lot harder, but we'll still have to wait until this level is over, because the last two levels are especially mean, and they will be pretty damn hard. I mean, this level doesn't really have a fixed difficulty curve, because the chapter starts out pretty easy, but the last few levels will be really taxing. With that said, I really like the last two stages of the game, if only because they require some kind of finesse that you haven't seen that much into the chapter. I mean, there's been some levels where you had to perfectly time your movements and everything, but into those levels, your moves have to be a whole lot better here. I mean, your basic jumps have to be good enough so that you don't drift too high or too low on the platform, so that there will be one part of you which will stick out for the lasers to fry to death. But yeah, while most of the chapter was not too hard, with the exception of a few levels, I'm talking about U3 of Woe, but the last level of this chapter will certainly make you die a whole lot. And the beauty of things is, as you can see, this is not a particularly hard level, at least not by the looks of it. You just have to jump here, but yeah, you can see the finesse of having to do your jumps correctly, because if you drift too low, then there's absolutely no way to save yourself. And by the way, it's not possible to do a jump when you're on the top layer in order to prevent the laser from burning you, because your character's jump is not high enough. I really like levels like these, if only because they look incredibly deceptive and they're like, oh come on, there's no way that I can struggle with this one level, come on, I need to get back into it and make it so that I can finally beat this level. You just have to do a few jumps there and there, how hard can it be? Well, it turns out that it's really hard. You have to constantly be dangling from the sides here because... Oh my god, I can't believe that I've missed this jump. But yeah, you have to constantly dangle from the side because there is no time for you to stand on top of the platforms, if only because the lasers appear on a way too frequent basis. And no, by the way, you cannot simply jump straight for the platform here. You always have to be on the sides. So yeah, that's the second of the levels into this one chapter, which really gave me a whole lot of trouble. I didn't really count the number of times that I have died on this one level, but it was a lot. We're talking about something like 30 or 40 times. It was an avalanche of goo balls. It's tricky mainly because you have to master goo balls' hair control, and there's not a whole lot of leeway behind the jumps here. And yeah, speaking of leeway, that was really close. Yeah, there is no means to hurry. More so considering that the power time is over 50 seconds. What kind of route did they take through this level in order to get to that time? That's pretty weird. So, that was a great way to end this chapter. It's a really simple level, but at the same time, it requires precise movements, and it becomes really tricky, but not frustrating. All in all, even though this is a pretty slow-moving chapter, and it usually goes against what I like into Super Meat Boy, I really like this chapter for some reason. So that's it for Sewers of Goo. Stay tuned for a forest-infested chapter. Yellowstone National Park by Ryoko TK.